You guys ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, the telltale sound of being ready to record a podcast is just taking a huge munch on some fucking chips.
It's my last chip. I'm not going to be the first one talking. Who cares?
I have
Hello.
tea.
Oh. Because you said that at the same time as me, it took me a second to process what you said, because what you said was, I have tea. What I heard was Chowder just going into his mic and saying, I have teeth. And I was like, what?
That's what I heard. Definitely before Jeff said what he said.
Hello, and welcome to the Common Geeking Program. We are a book club style podcast where each episode we discuss a different topic from our own geeky and nerdy perspectives. I am your host, Jeff Leavitt, and this time around, we've been doing a few of these where one of us comes on with some convoluted thing and explains it to the other two people who are not at all experienced with that, and we're continuing with that sort of thing. Should probably write a script for these kinds of episodes at some point, so it's not just me vomiting out of my mouth.
Maybe even come up with a catchy name for it.
Yeah, but that can be a problem for future us. But
we can call them the best episodes.
Oh my gosh.
The most fun.
And this time around,
new listener extravaganzas.
This time around, one of us is going to be explaining the lore of Destiny to us.
What? Oh, I thought we were doing Undertale.
Is that true? That's not what I thought.
I thought we were doing Destiny.
Yeah,
but,
that's what I said.
Okay,
I don't.
Let's
so,
fucking,
Colin, I hope you're prepared for this because
let's
turns
fucking
out none of us
go.
are
Okay,
experienced.
I have so much stuff pulled up about Undertale on my screen. Let me pivot.
I would like to talk about Undertale, but
But Chowder's familiar with Undertale.
I don't know. I can't decide.
I mean, fucking one way or the other. I have no idea about either of them, really. But Destiny was what I was mentally prepared for to be hearing about.
Yeah, no, so I am, so here, okay, so wow, this is something I don't think we've ever experienced.
No, we usually have a good idea
Something
what we
we've
want.
never experienced
Going in.
before is Colin not reading things carefully.
talking- yeah.
I experience that every time I talk to you
Clearly.
on Discord.
That's true. I did get my second shot this weekend, and okay, so I got my second shot Friday at noon, and I felt like a little low energy for the day, and I was just like, well, it's fine, I'll be fine. And I went to sleep thinking wow, I got out of that scot-free. I woke up at 1 a.m. with the worst chills I've had in so long. I just grabbed a heating pad and I got no sleep. I felt like garbage all weekend. Today I'm fine. It's been 2 days now, so I'm bouncing back. But yeah, I have not been paying close attention to much of anything and maybe have forgotten some things. Now, this could work fine either way. It's going to depend on Chowder, because if we talk about Destiny, it's all going to be me, and I'm definitely going to feed off your questions for how we dive into this. If we do Undertale, I imagine that I would recount my recent playthrough of the game for the first time and then let Chowder pile on because he knows a lot more about it. So I don't know. Which of those sounds more interesting to
I'm
the two
still
of you?
on Team Destiny because the mission statement for these types of episodes is one person explains things to two people, not
Fair.
two people explain thing to one person.
Okay.
But that's just my
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, I'm indecisive, so I'll just go with whoever is decisive. So guess we're going with Destiny.
Sounds good.
Okay, fair enough. There we go. You do get a chip crunch because now I have to prepare.
Great.
So I guess so. Destiny is a video game series.
Hey.
This is still the intro.
Yeah,
We're not
in
the body of it yet.
As much as we've bumbled around this, I have yet to introduce the two of you yet. We are joined by Colin and Chowder, who have at least once already said their names, or someone else has at this point. This is just the way that this episode is going now. So I guess fucking welcome the chips, I guess. I guess we're just chill with the chips now.
I'm not doing a lot. It's a little anxiety here. Destiny is, oh boy, if you thought Tenet didn't make sense, buckle up.
But so we're gonna start by
yeah.
having Colin summarize Destiny, and then we'll ask him our obligatory questions.
You can't summarize Destiny.
Well, you're gonna fucking
I can try my best to
try.
explain to you. Well, okay, let's start with this. So Destiny is a video game.
Cool.
That's the basics. It is developed by Bungie. They have developed a lot of games, but they made their name with Halo. They developed the first 5 mainline Halo games up until 2010. Basically made the Xbox what it is today. Halo, huge iconic game franchise, and then they said, well, what if we made a bigger, crazier, wilder version of that? So how we tackle this episode, I'm really going to lean on you guys to ask questions, because Destiny is one of the biggest, weirdest, wildest pieces of entertainment I have engaged with, because it is at once maybe one of the most fun and accessible games I've played, and also one of the most inscrutable, difficult to parse games I've played.
Destiny is the game that had, like, all of its lore as, like, supplemental trading cards or some shit, right?
Yeah,
for a while.
Yeah, it did for a while. So I guess how we want to discuss this, would you guys kind of want to get an idea of what the overarching story is? Because that would be hard to summarize.
Yeah.
There's actually a 4-hour video that will get you through the first 6 years
at least let me know what the setting is, because basically the information I'm going in with is Destiny is a video game. Destiny is something that several of my friends play quite frequently, and Destiny had fucking lore cards that weren't actually in the game or some shit like that. That is about all the information that I have.
Vaguely sci-fi, science, fantasy is what I pick up, and that's about it.
So we can either go down the route of what is the story of Destiny, or I think more what has the experience of Destiny been. Because Destiny is a live service video game, meaning
it makes me roll my eyes.
It is constantly online. There is new content in the form of, scheduled expansions, kind of like your Worlds of Warcraft. I pluralized that in a way that was grammatically correct, but didn't respect what World of Warcraft is at all. So you've got those expansions, but then you've also got things that come out pretty much all the time.
World of Warcrafts, because that's the proper name.
No, because you're not talking...
The proper name is World of Warcraft.
That is if you're talking about, like, lowercase Worlds of Warcraft, but World of Warcraft is a single thing. It is the name of a game. So it would be World of Warcraft. You would pluralize it. Yeah, I said Worlds of Warcraft. That's what I said. So I fucked up. That'd be like if you had a movie called Attorney General. If you made multiple movies called Attorney General, they would be Attorney Generals, not Attorneys General.
Yeah,
so that's the mistake I made. This is going great. So I think what I'd rather take you through is the experience of Destiny and how the story has been presented over the 6 or 7 years that it has been active.
I would like to know some ground level things about what the setting is, and that's not the whole...
I think that this is going to sort of get you there for sure.
Okay.
So with the basics, I guess I should also say it is a first person shooter. Chowder's right. It is sci-fi, science fantasy. Beyond that, I think we can sort of dive in. So for any of you who, like me, came to this looking to learn more about Undertale, let's learn about Destiny instead. Okay. I'm glad we had that break. I have changed my pants after the horror of realizing I was leading this episode. So, Destiny was launched in 2014 after a number of delays. I, as a large fan of the Halo franchise, I've enjoyed it under Bungie. I've enjoyed it under 343 Industries. I was like, what could they possibly be doing next? It all leaked, and we got to see some world details. Science fantasy is a really good way to describe it, because in creating the game, they, at Bungie, basically were like, we want to do sci-fi, but we want the mystique of fantasy. And they were like, ¿por qué no los dos? So they just smushed them together. So the basic setting of Destiny, as it was communicated when the game came out, is there's this giant white orb called the Traveler that appeared around
story of my life.
Jupiter and then Mars. We found it on Mars in I think around, it's either 2014 or 2030. I feel like there have been different presentations of it. But basically went there, we found it, and we found out that this thing was terraforming Mars. It was raining. So you're like, okay, what's going on here? It turns out this is a giant entity with sort of magical powers, and it basically not only terraformed the planets, but also helped humans develop technology, and there was a boom. The golden age of humanity was we were able to colonize Mars. Venus became like a garden world. Well, Mercury had been, but something happened to Mercury.
I mean, can you really colonize a place that has no people in it? I mean...
Yeah. I mean, that's what we call it now. We could colonize the moon. It wouldn't be taking it away from somebody. It's a version of colonization that isn't problematic yet. It will get there, but we got to give it a chance. So they managed to colonize these other planets, some of the moons, and then suddenly these alien races, all serving something known as the Darkness. Star Wars fans are going to love this one. They're all sort of invading the solar system, and this orb, now known as the Traveler, tries to fight the darkness off. It is wounded, it retreats to Earth, and a multitude of alien races ultimately sort of whittle humanity down to the point where we are reduced from our solar system spanning empire to a single city in Russia, where the Traveler floats above, and we are stuck below that. That's the backdrop, and we play hundreds of years removed from that.
Just sounds like alt universe Kingdom Hearts or something.
Yeah, you've done the Kingdom Hearts explainer thing to me, so this is my payback to you, and it's going to make just as much sense, I promise. So,
wonderful. What does the orb look like when it's wounded? Does it have
the bottom of it?
inside?
Not really. It does look very mechanical. So if you actually just here, let me just drop a picture from just the original box art for Destiny in our Discord chat here, if I can. Copy image, please. There we go. Getting used to this new setup here. Upload. So the orb at the bottom, it's like it almost looks scarred, almost like parts of a building that were blown off. Except it's an orb, so it's happening sort of spherically up the sides. So
how big is orb?
Pretty big. Like you can see it from orbit. It looks like maybe a tenth the size of the moon. So it's huge. It's absolutely humongo massive. So I said that the darkness was the force that sort of invaded, and that is called the darkness because the force that the Traveler used to enhance humanity is called the light.
Yeah,
so,
I figured that was coming.
Yes.
So I was just, when you said the darkness, I was just imagining a similarly big orb, except very dark color instead.
When the game launched, basically you play as a guardian. I guess this is still true now. I shouldn't say when the game launched. I switched topics in my head halfway through that sentence. So you play as a guardian. Over the centuries of the Traveler protecting humanity and growing humanity, there were people that were enhanced by the light. They bore a lot of different names, but essentially they, if they die, they are resurrected by the light. So you're immortal. That's actually the game's mechanic for respawning.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that just a way to explain gameplay?
Yes, absolutely. After the Traveler was wounded...
So they're doing the Dark Souls thing.
Pretty much, yeah. No, it's like, this is definitely not a Souls-like, though. This is absolutely an RPG. It's like if Borderlands went way harder in the RPG direction. And
so, you're reborn in like the same fucking place, or
so it's technically, yes. I'll get into the mechanics of that because there are these story elements that support the gameplay, but at some point the game has to take precedence, and the lore doesn't apply quite as well because it's like, it's not as fun to play a game if you're playing for story. I still want to shoot stuff. Bungie makes good games because they're really good at making guns fun, which is a great thing to say in 2021. Now, the Traveler, when it was wounded, shat out a bunch of these tiny little floating robots named Peter Dinklage, but only for a year because they couldn't afford him after that. They're called ghosts. And the way that the game starts, and even if you fire up Destiny 2, which is the active game now, the intro you'll get is you get a little explainer of the backstory, and then a ghost wakes you up. And the little floating robot is like, I've been looking for you so long. Let's get the fuck out of here. And you're like, okay. The ghost leads you back to the city. You are required to choose one of 3 classes. So the gameplay classes are Titans, which are meant to be very tanky, more like damage-based classes. You have Hunters, which are quick. They have invisibility and dodging and higher mobility, typically. And you have Warlocks, which are like your space mages. So that's our friend Austin. He's a giant nerd. He likes to roleplay as someone who reads books, which is like, why?
Yeah, I mean, that's typical Austin.
Is it really role-playing if that's what he is?
But that's what I'm saying is this is space fantasy. He gets to be a space wizard, and he chooses to be one that's a fucking nerd. At least I pretend to be a cool guy. I know I'm not. That's why I pretend. That's just my thought. But
yeah, but Austin's already cool, so he doesn't have to pretend to be cool.
Oh, okay. It's the inverse. I'm not cool. I aspire to be Austin Hood.
It's like in Spy Kids 3D Game Over, how all of the 3 characters that Junie meets in the game world they roleplay one character to the left, pretty much. Yeah. How the cool guy pretends to be smart, and the smart guy pretends to be strong, and the strong guy pretends to be cool.
That's exactly my experience with Destiny. So this is the foundation of the game. You have your class. You then are able to equip multiple subclasses. So when I use the term light, it is not just this, philosophical thing. It's not just this ideological thing. It's also just kind of the name for the space magic that you get to use. Yes, the guns are very important, but you also have a series of abilities. Initially, the abilities were limited to Void, which is purple, Solar, which is fiery and orange, and Arc, which everyone thought was ice, but it's electricity.
That makes more sense.
It sure does. Took me a little while to get that straight. I didn't pay a lot of attention for the first year I played Destiny, because when Destiny launched, you had your 3 classes, you had your subclasses, you had a story about trying to save the Traveler, and it didn't make sense and was bad. It was not fun. It was gorgeous. Bungie made a gorgeous game. It felt so fun to shoot things, but there wasn't a lot to do. This was pretty early on in the mainstream nature of live service games, and they hadn't quite figured it out. And we see this a lot where people try to launch these games that are meant to be supported regularly, and they feel hollow because they've built all these systems. There's not always the content to support them. So what could you do in Destiny? You could go to Earth, you could go to the moon, you could go to Venus, you could go to Mars.
So I was saying there's no single player campaign.
It can be played all single player for the story missions. But let me tell you this.
Right, but the story missions are things that were added later, right?
No, the story missions were there, but just to sort of catalog the experience for you, my experience with the game was I got to a point in the story where I was like, okay, this is starting to get good. Let me see where it goes next. And that was it.
Right, okay.
So it felt pretty threadbare. I think you mentioned the lore being not accessible in the game. The only way to find backstory for the game, which its most famous line is, "I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain." That's the kind of exposition you got the whole way through. Something you can tell a writer patted themselves on the back for because it would work in a movie.
Right.
But when you have dozens of hours of gameplay strung on dialogue of that level of substance, it's inscrutable. You can't make sense of anything. There are 4 alien races you're fighting. You got the Fallen, which are aliens. You got the Vex, which are robots. You've got the Hive, which are kind of evil, dark wizard bug people. And then you got the Cabal, which are big, beefy space rhinos. And you kind of don't get much more characterization than that. And it's just really, really weak story. So when Destiny launched, everyone was kind of like, is this what we've been waiting for? Is this Destiny? Are you serious?
Is this our
And then
Destiny?
you go to play... And then this is our destiny, is to suffer here. And the gameplay loop of live service games usually revolves around repeating materials. And coming as someone who played Halo, where you have a story and you can beat that story, and then you have multiplayer and you can play that, it was weird to be presented with story missions where it's I just have to play these over and over again to get new stuff?
Yeah,
and I was bored.
Yeah.
And people were ready to write the game off until a couple weeks later they released the first raid, which was called Vault of Glass. That's actually coming back to Destiny 2 this month, so this is some good timing. Vault of Glass is a 6-person mission with complex mechanics, difficult boss fights. You need to level up your character. You need to get the right gear. You need to strategize what classes, what subclasses your group of 6 is going to bring in to the game. And it was the beacon of hope. It was like, this is excellent. This is what the game can be. So through the first year of rough little expansions, it was kind of like, Vault of Glass is amazing. We want the whole game to get there. So the first year of Destiny was tepid response, dropping player counts, and a kind of just like, is this really what we're in for? But knowing there was something better buried in the game. Mm-hmm. Have I lost you guys so far?
No, that all makes sense. I'm a little bit curious.
That follows.
So these missions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious about a couple things actually. Like how much actual. They're just like tasks, right? Like or like extended tasks. You don't get like plot or story or anything from these necessarily. Is that right?
There's a variety. So some of these missions were a straight up story. The interface made it difficult to see like the order of story missions if you wanted to go back and replay them. Right. It was just kind of like you get through it and you're done.
Gotcha.
Unless you really wanted to pay attention. But those were structured story missions with beginnings and ends. I wouldn't say the structure of them was very strong, though. It sometimes did feel like doing a task.
Right.
There were also things like bounties and patrols, which are straight-up tasks. Mm-hmm. It's just like, go a place, do a thing, get a reward.
Gotcha.
Very simple. You also had strikes. Strikes are a little larger. Those are the missions that you're expected to repeat. A strike is much more structured. There's a much clearer introduction to it, a story threaded along where you're going. It takes you about 15 to 20 minutes to beat it, and there's usually a middle boss and an end boss. Those are fun. Those are just fun missions to play. But when the game launched, there weren't a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And the main gameplay loop, if you didn't want to play player versus player, online competitive stuff, was to do strikes over and over again. And there wasn't enough variety in the game to make that fun. That's kind of the breadth of missions that you had at launch. There were 2 expansions in the first year. They added some story missions. They added some weapons, but it kind of felt like more of the same. Any other questions before because that's going to be the longest section there, but yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Chowder.
I mean, sounds like pretty standard MMO stuff.
I guess the other question I had to ask was like, so those like the added missions or whatever, those are the things that like technically you could do by yourself, but like really it's the experience is meant to be had like with other people.
Yeah, it was. I remember when Destiny was first announced. I think I mentioned Borderlands earlier. I remember looking at it, and at that point, I'd been playing Borderlands with my friends Pat, who you know, and then Tyler, who's never been on the show. I played Borderlands with them, and I got so bored of it that when this game looked like Borderlands, I was like, "Oh, are you fucking kidding me?" And at first, that's kind of what it felt like. Except it was very self-serious and not as funny. So I was just like,
Borderlands, but not as fun. Cool.
Yeah. The saving graces of the game were Vault of Glass and Nathan Fillion. Those were the 2 things that kept me coming back. So everyone was like, this game can get better. So a year later, 2015, it did. They revamped a bunch of leveling systems, a bunch of interface, quality of life improvements, and they released an expansion called The Taken King. This added a new class of enemy called the Taken, wherein a hive god, one of those bug people, one of their gods, essentially can render individuals willless into an alternate dimension and then essentially convert them to his will, send them back and attack you. So it remixed all the enemies with like this creepy thing. It had a really fun story. It introduced a new class of weapons. It gave new subclasses for each person so that everyone had one of each element, solar, arc, void, and a whole set of moves and abilities for each one. And this is where people are like, okay, Destiny's here. This is what Destiny can be. And about 6 months into the
The Taken is what? People abducted by these bugs?
The Taken is what... the Taken was the name for this, quote, species, this army of creatures that had been sucked into the will of the king, which was named Oryx.
So they were playable,
in one of the earlier expansions.
The Taken was a playable class?
No, it's
okay.
I mentioned the four races, the Fallen, the Hive.
Yeah, when you said they added a new class, I thought that you were saying like. Oh,
I meant a race. I'm so sorry.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they added a new, quote, race of aliens called the Taken, and it just remixes the other aliens that you fought against.
Gotcha.
And calls them all the Taken, and they were tougher. You had to really strategize to fight them differently. And you suddenly started to see a little bit more about what this game could be, because what makes an RPG interesting is how you can design your character, how you can build its mechanics to go up against the mechanics of the world. And Taken King was our first glimpse at like what happens when the game gets rebuilt to focus on, here are your abilities, here are guns that do fancy things, and here's how you can mix them all together. And it just really felt a lot better. The story of the Hive trying to supplant the will of everything and use the darkness to take over everyone's minds and fighting the guy that did that is a fun story, is very cool. And we got another raid called King's Fall where you beat the Taken King. It also tied back to some earlier story stuff, because one of those expansions in the rough first year, we killed a guy named Crota. Guess what? Oryx was his dad. So we had a 1 year long through line of like, hey, we kicked this guy's ass, and now his dad is coming to clean up. And it's where all the things started to come together, and we were like, okay, this is getting somewhere. It's also a few months into the year where they really started to get better with live service stuff, meaning on semi-regular bases, they would actually throw in new missions. They would throw in new strikes, new guns, new abilities. So if you played and you were waiting for an expansion, you still might get something new. Speaking to the gameplay, I mean, like, you guys might be able to speak from this for like other RPGs, even stuff like Pokemon, where it's just like, you have to go into a place, you want to get the best weapons in your arsenal.
Yeah.
And if you go into a mission with a different set of Pokemon, if you go into a gym with a different set of Pokemon, it could be a wildly different experience.
Yeah.
And this felt like a really good application of that idea to just a Halo-style first-person shooter. Yeah, I don't know, 2015 Taken King launch really kind of started to come together.
So I guess some of the stuff I want to hear about is because, like, the idea of these episodes, right, where you're explaining this convoluted thing to us. The convoluted thing really about Destiny is its wild-ass lore, right?
Yeah.
So are there any points to that you want to cover in some fashion?
So, since we're on the Taken King point, what was in the Grimoire, this sort of online app-only way of getting into the lore,
just bonkers
you unlock
in
something
of
called
itself.
is so crazy. As there was the backstory for Oryx, the Taken King, is that he is one of 3 Hive gods. Now, the Books of Sorrow, the sort of category in which they got all this stuff, which itself is filled with a bunch of references that, like, hey, we only have one source for this information. Don't trust it, baby. What we have for the Hive is that thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, I don't know, long-ass time ago, the Hive were this bug species. And they are humanoid, but, like, their babies are larvae. They're gross. When you kill them, these little flaky things come off. They're bugs. They were this weak species called the Krill that lived for about 9 years on a planet called Fundament, which is a gas giant, and they actually lived under the highest layers of the gas giant. And the
Fundament. That's such a terrible name.
Yep, sure is. The original names of these characters, Ulrix, I don't remember their original names. Sorry, it's so wild. But Oryx has
it's a lot of proper nouns.
Ulrix was a woman Krill with sisters Shivu Arath and Savathun, and these are the 3. These are not their original names, but I believe that they found a ship floating on one of the oceans of Fundament, and they ended up exploring it and coming into contact with a few worm gods, which were giant fucking worms that served the darkness. What is that? I don't know. But they spent a lot of time communing with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Eventually,
what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, is there, like, the overarching story? Like, yeah, you can get into the minutia of, like, all the different aliens that are all part of this thing, but what is the thing?
This is the thing. So we still don't know exactly what the darkness is. That we expect that story to conclude in a couple years. The Oryx eventually developed an ideology called the sword logic. The ideology is simply that, like, if you want a thing, you have to take it. And anyone who can't afford to take something deserves to die. It's very, survival of the fittest. Yeah, very survival of the fittest to the extreme. And on this, and with the help of the worm gods, the Krill were transformed into the Hive. Oryx, technically a transgendered character, was a woman. Upon assuming Hive form, became Oryx, now a man, the Taken King, because communing with these worm gods led him to an alternate dimension that we call a throne realm. And it is that in that realm where the worm gods are rooted, Oryx can pull people into that dimension, and that is where he supplants their will. Because he's tied to that throne realm, if he is killed, he will simply come back in the throne realm and then just transfer back to the real life. And then meanwhile, on the side, Shivu Arath and Savathun are kind of doing their own things along the same lines. Eventually, they tried to supplant Oryx, and then he killed them both in their throne realms to permakill them. And then they came back later anyway. I don't remember the details on that because it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
is this convoluted enough for you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's getting
yeah,
convoluted.
Okay, so that's the history of Oryx and the Taken King. In the game, all you really confront directly is a big dude with a funny helmet saying, I hate you, and you killed my son. And then you fight him a bunch, and then you win. In the meantime, there's also Eris Morn.
I don't even know.
Exactly, yeah. In the meantime, you're being guided through the expansion by Eris Morn. She was a woman a woman guardian who went with a fire team of 6 to the Crota raid, the raid where you go fight his son, way before we ever tried it, and her entire fire team died down there, and she was the only one left. So for, like, a long time, like thousands of years or whatever, maybe, or less, she was just left to survive in the darkness of the bowels of the moon where the Hive had dug. She couldn't see, so I guess she replaced her own eyes with the eyes of a Hive. Fucking awesome doctor skills. And now she is like this harbinger of what the Hive are going to do. So, yeah, that's the backstory of killing Crota and then killing Oryx. That's just one expansion.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
boy.
So we're definitely not going to get through all the things, but I'm going to keep going. I like this. I'm going to keep going through Destiny, and you're going to hit me with, okay, explain this, and I'll go as deep as I fucking can.
I don't know if that's what I want to do. Because after asking you to explain that and listening to it for the past 5 minutes, I'm like, this is not content to listen to.
It is convoluted as shit.
Yeah.
I think that the Hive backstory is one of the most complicated. I think the rest are a little lighter and a little more interesting. So a year after Taken King, next expansion, Rise of Iron. This would be the last expansion to Destiny that they ever put out. Rise of Iron is focused on something called Siva, which is a piece of technology developed by humans during the Golden Age when the Traveler was like giving you a big boom of everything you could do. It's essentially nanobot technology that you can program to sort of build anything. You could build buildings, you could build vehicles, you could build weapons, whatever. And the Fallen. Now, the backstory of the Fallen is that the Traveler actually used to work for them.
The backstory of the Fallen is actually that he was one of the 13 Primes and then betrayed all of his brothers while fighting Unicron.
Okay.
And
who's trying to describe inscrutable, terrible lore, sir? So the backstory of the Fallen, they're one of the main alien races that you fight in the game. Is that the Traveler used to, support them. They were blessed by the light and by the Traveler. And then in an event called the Whirlwind, that is the name for their societal collapse, where the darkness attacked them, and their ideology had shifted so that they didn't just, rely on the Traveler. They worshipped it. They built robots in its image to provide them food and support called Ether. And the Traveler eventually left them. So they're called the Fallen because they fell from grace. Their actual race name is called the Elixni, but we call them the Fallen.
Wait. They built robots in the image of the Traveler.
They're called servitors.
So they built balls. They built orbs. Okay. I don't know if that's fair to say.
Floating
it's like,
orbs.
oh yeah, in fucking
in
reference
in the lore, it is explicitly, they explicitly designed it because that's part of the design language of the game is like, I mean, the Traveler is a big circle. Orb. So the Fallen, like orbs. Yeah, they're like, they really lean on that stuff a lot. But it is very explicit that part of that the Fallen's obsession with machine technology is based on their relationship to the Traveler. So, and now here's where just explaining the game is inherently going to get into some weird lore. See, it's a slow build. I had to get you there. So during the boom, during the Golden Age, before the collapse, during the Golden Age, we developed the SIVA technology, and what ended up happening was some of the Fallen found it and spliced it into their own bodies. So they are real
quick. What's SIVA technology?
SIVA is the nanobot technology that you could use to build buildings and weapons and stuff.
Nanomachines.
So these splicers basically started, cutting off parts of their body and replacing it with SIVA. And that was just your antagonist for the year. The further backstory is that there's this in-game event called Iron Banner. It's just like a tournament thing you do every couple of weeks. But the guy who ran it, his name is Paladin. He's called an Iron Lord. We were always like...
His name is Salad?
Saladin.
Like a salad paladin?
Yes, exactly. Salad Paladin, if that's easier to remember. So Salad Paladin runs the Iron Banner, and for the first 2 years, we're kind of like, what the fuck is this guy's deal? Who gives a shit about him? He's got this big Iron Banner. Who cares?
I mean, obviously his deal is clean eating and the destruction of the meat industry.
Yes. So...
That or they just tried to make an Arabic name by smashing together syllables. Yeah. Saladin.
Yeah, and they failed. It's kind of like how in Halo Reach they had the name George, but it spelled Jorge, but they pronounced it George. God. It's a little weird.
It's like how all the names in Game of Thrones.
But the dude was Hungarian, so I think they're just trying to project some
how really, all the names of Game of Thrones have to be fantasy things. So the people who just have normal names have to be spelled super fucking weird. Like Jamie is like Jimee or some nonsense like that.
Yeah, like you can criticize Tolkien for a bunch of things. At least there's serious internal logic to his naming and language schemes. Destiny has none of that. Destiny, something else I should fucking say about this series is that it has the wildest names for shit. One of my favorite pieces of gear in the original Destiny was a cloak that was covered in duct tape, and it was just called Unbelievably Old Cloak. Then you compare that to a gun called the Vex Mythoclast. You have weird, geeky, hard programmer terms called Lord High Fixer. Then guns called the Palindrome, and it's the gamut of weapons is crazy.
Wait. I've gotta know what the fucking Palindrome does.
The Palindrome is a hand cannon, so it's like a revolver.
Sure. Does it shoot you at the same time that it shoots the enemy?
Nope, it's just the name of the gun. It's just a weird name.
That's
and
so
even if the name doesn't thematically make sense, there's one called Red Death, where the gun is red and you shoot people with it
and they die,
and then you get more health.
Yeah, that one makes sense.
And hey, that makes plenty of sense. And then you've got what is it right now? The I guess falling guillotine makes sense because it's the sword that you spin around really fast. Then you've got,
but it's not falling. You just wait. If it's a falling guillotine, you would assume it's like a death from above.
You would, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would. You certainly would.
If it just spins around real fast, wouldn't it be spinning guillotine?
You'd think so. You sure would think so. A lot of the weapons each also have their own lore, which now, thank God, you can access in the game. So you got another sword called the Lament, where you're like, why would you call a giant chainsaw sword the Lament? And it turns out it's because one of the characters you've known since the beginning of the first game is actually descended from the original person to create the robotic race of the Exos, and the Lament categorizes his story from losing his personality through these multiple evolutions of Exo to Exo over 44 iterations and thousands of years.
Wait a fucking second. Then who named it that?
Bungie did.
Yeah, but who in the lore named it that? Who was just like, I've experienced, did he name it that? Or someone like, I've experienced this guy's journey of fucking lamenting, losing his fucking humanity, therefore this gun, I'm gonna name the Lament? What, like, who is this fucking dude's, number one fan or some shit like that?
Question. This is a good question.
No, he said it's a chainsaw sword,
It is a chainsaw sword. I guess I don't know if the gear names are entirely diegetic. Some of them kind of have to be, such as the Helm of Saint 14, which is a helmet that belonged to Saint 14. Sure. But then, then I've also got, the two-tailed fox, which is a rocket that shoots two rockets at once, each of a different color. That's clearly a Sonic the Hedgehog reference. So I don't know if anyone inside Destiny is playing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Hold the fuck up. There are plenty examples of cultural things about two-tailed or multiple-tailed foxes other than Tails, the fucking fox from Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah. Where do you fucking think they got it from?
I'm pretty sure Tails is just a reference to the Kitsune, man.
That's true, but the Kitsune doesn't have two tails anyway.
Doesn't it?
But they do have overt references to other things in the game. It's so expansive I can't remember all of them. But yeah, the naming of gear sometimes feels diegetic and sometimes doesn't, because I can't imagine the name Lord High Fixer sticks in my brain. In technology, Lord High Fixer is just kind of a colloquial term for somebody who really troubleshoots things to the extreme.
Ooh, hey, you know what?
He's the person in the back of the store.
We got
fucking fix a bunch of shit.
The Naruto also has a two-tailed fox.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're just Googling two-tailed fox?
Yeah,
things?
yeah. I mean, so far what I'm seeing is the gun, just a photoshopped image of a fox with two tails, tails from that, and then the thing from Naruto.
Back to Rise of Iron for a second. This is the last expansion in Destiny. Essentially, we learned that Paladin,
that motherfucker has way more than two tails. What the fuck are you talking about?
He was.
Oh, there. Okay.
He was a guardian before they were guardians. He could resurrect indefinitely before the ghosts and before the collapse and everything. And they were called Iron Lords, and he worked to shovel Siva away, so we work with him to try to shovel it away again. And we find out that his entire fire team died and got corrupted and possessed by Siva, and then we have to fight all his old Guardian friends and kill them all, and stop Siva from being programmed by the Splicer Fallen to take over everything. And we do. That's Destiny 1. That's it. We beat it. We got it.
And so
now
Destiny 2 just pick up from where Destiny 1 left off, pretty much?
So yeah, this sort of yearly cadence of large expansions continues. Destiny 2 is a new game. Part of the reason they went to a new game entirely was to get rid of old gear so that they could balance the new game. So they didn't have to account for all the old stuff. They could just start fresh, clean slate, rejigger all the abilities, the interfaces, the underlying engineering, and the netcode. They really wanted to just best foot forward instead of tinkering with what we got before. Start fresh, do it right. Story-wise, it continues. A year after Rise of Iron, the campaign for Destiny 2 is called the Red War, where the Cabal, those big rhino people, really come back with a vengeance. They block off the Traveler and suck away everyone's light, and the story of the campaign is sort of building that back and rebuilding the Guardian forces, and the Traveler ultimately wakes up, comes out of its fucking injured stupor, and helps you kick the Cabal away. Sure, whatever. The game might as well happen.
You also don't know what the fuck the Traveler really is, right? Also, yet?
We still kind of don't. All we know is that it's an agent of the light. That's honestly as specific as it gets. The stories that we're seeing now, because I'm not going to have time to go through everything, the stories that we're seeing now are explicitly addressing the darkness. In the most recent expansion, Beyond Light, very creative name, like Fundament, we can use darkness abilities for the first time. So we had our light classes. Now we have dark classes. Yeah, the first one that we've got is called Stasis. It is actually an ice power, and a lot of people don't like it because when you're playing multiplayer, it sucks when you just suddenly can't move. Bad feeling. Just not fun. A little
just like in real life.
So when you say Stasis...
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Chowder.
Yeah, so when you say Stasis is an ice power, do you mean that it's like just ice power, or do you actually like put people into stasis?
It is themed to be like you have casting abilities for ice spells. You can create giant stasis crystals. You can. My character, I'm a hunter. I throw shurikens that when they hit people, it slows them down because it makes them all chilly. And stuff like that. So it's technically not, frozen water, but it behaves with an ice theme. This is part of why they adopted the science fantasy, was so that they could get this very classic fantasy style approach to magic, but still have it grounded in spaceships and guns and jumping.
It's like how in how in Pokemon, how the poison type is really just like purple magic, but
yeah, basically, yeah. Honestly,
yeah. Although I actually do kind of like that stasis is ice. Yeah. Like I actually have like an idea for this story, and there's this one character whose power is like manipulating heat, and like an evolution of that ability they eventually get is like sort of freezing things in stasis, because how their ability works is just they're actually like controlling the molecules of something, and like causing it to vibrate more or vibrate less, and
and it's like, and that's the depth of thought that all that goes into all this stuff. But on the front end, it still has to be like a fun shooter to play. So it's a weird tightrope to walk. What ended up happening though, skipping back from Beyond Light to original Destiny 2, is that by giving it that clean slate. This is also when Bungie was working with Activision, the publishers of Call of Duty, to make this game. So they weren't allowed to call it an MMO. And Activision was like, hey, a lot of people like Destiny, but if you guys couldn't get from the descriptions I've given you so far, a lot of people think it's fucking weird. So we're going to make this game easier to get into. And by doing that, they made guns a little less interesting. They made customizing your character a little less flexible. Missions didn't have as many things to get you. So when Destiny 2 first hit, it wasn't like Destiny 1 where people were like, this sucks. They were like, this is great for a week. And then they were like, oh, this is empty. And then they got bored.
Yeah.
So much like Destiny 1, Destiny 2 had a rough first year.
Yeah, no, MMOs live and die by their customizability.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it was pretty weak by the time the next expansion rolled out, which was called Forsaken. Forsaken ended up being very much the Taken King of Destiny 2. It reintroduced a lot of that customization, the random perk settings on guns, so that if you could like really experiment with different versions of the same gun to see which felt the best. It's when they killed off Nathan Fillion's character, because Nathan Fillion got a network TV show, and much like Peter Dinklage, they couldn't keep him on anymore. So it's funny, in the expansion where Nathan Fillion's character dies, he's actually voiced also by the guy that took over for Peter Dinklage.
Oh, really?
Doing a Nathan Fillion impression.
Okay, what the fuck is the point of, like, if they're just gonna replace him for the one where, like, why not either replace him after he dies or fucking,
Yeah, no, they had to say goodbye to the character. You can't delete Nathan Fillion from the game entirely. What they did with Peter Dinklage, actually, was... I'm not going to lie. I like the tone of his voice, but he gave a pretty uninspired performance. They replaced him with Nolan North, who's a prolific voice actor in gaming and animation.
Wow, they went with the most uncreative choice. Nolan North is in everything.
He's in absolutely everything. And Nolan North, it's a little more cartoony, but what they actually did was they retroactively, they went back and they replaced all of Peter Dinklage's original dialogue.
Oh, wow,
like,
rude.
They redid everything because they wanted the game to be cohesive.
Yeah, sure.
With Nathan Fillion, you can't do that. So the Nathan Fillion stuff that's still in the game is still him. But because of how beloved his character Cade 6 was, Cade 6, if you deleted him from the game, people would have flipped out. He's so much fun. He's great. It's so fun to listen to, so fun to play with. But Yeah. Yeah, Ghost is that he's your little robot that follows you around and does stuff for you. He resurrects you when you die. To harken back to like an hour ago, Jeff, your question about respawning, the idea of how you respawn in the game. If you go into an area and you die, your ghost forms a little bubble of light and you can get back up in a couple seconds, or your friend can pick you up. But if you go into an area that is labeled a darkness zone, functionally, what that means is it's more like a traditional video game checkpoint where if you die, you're just kicked back outside the area and you have to do it all over again.
Right.
The fiction is that because there are agents of the darkness present, that the energy there that is, opposite the light inhibits the ghost's ability to resurrect you. So you either can't be resurrected as quickly, or you can't be resurrected there at all. So, like, and here's what I'm going to say. All the shit that I've been explaining, for the first few years of Destiny, this was not apparent. This was not evident at all. When I said that there's a 4-hour lore video, that's just one of many long videos I've watched on YouTube from someone whose account is My Name is Bife, where he goes through and collects incredible lore compilations of the game. And where Destiny has turned a corner recently is they're finally putting this stuff front and center. So like the Fallen, right? This race that used to work for the Traveler, work with the Traveler, and they worship it. But now they've fallen from grace and they're splintered across all these houses across the solar system. Beyond Light's story was a story about one of these Fallen saying, fuck all this ideology, fuck worshiping the machines. The darkness is more powerful. The light abandoned us, let's join the darkness. That's how we get the stasis ability. We see insight as to how these houses sort of work with each other and are formed on the back end. Mm-hmm. And now this season of the Splicer, harkening back to those Siva splicers, there is another Fallen who he's with a group of Fallen that are not hostile, and they're moving into the city to live with humans, and some people don't like that, and some people do. But instead of me having to go online and research what are these aliens, I can walk around and talk to people, and they're like, hey, we don't like being called the Fallen. It's racist. We're called the Elixni. Not everyone's an asshole, dick. And we get to see their babies. We get to see them as refugees. And they're taking all this stuff that used to be subtext that for the first few years I couldn't care less about, and they're putting it front and center. And it's just like, it's about fucking time. So the lore is still convoluted as shit, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the interesting parts are there to experience in the game. It's not just play through a boring mission and wonder why you're doing it. It's here's why you're doing it. And you can follow the threads. This Fallen, that Splicer that's helping us now, I did a mission with him 3 years ago, and I got a cool gun. And it's just nice to see that come back. So part of the convolution of Destiny now is that you have this weird fucking foundation and backstory, and it's all coming back, and it's all being roped in, and it's all related. So if you want to invest in it, it's become one of the most rewarding narrative experiences, which after the first year of Destiny, which was threadbare and boring, I'm astounded that I now think Destiny is one of the best story experiences I have in a video game because of how these things pay off. So
yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about like giving it a bit more of a slow drip too, especially since like, you know, this game is continuously added to, so they can kind of take their time with and build up suspense with things. Even if it's not like narrative suspense, it's like, oh, mystery and shit like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I've heard from a game dev that like something they gotta worry about is like putting the content in a game and then like the players tearing through the content no matter how much, and then being like, oh, there's just no content in the game.
That happens. Like 50 hours. That happens constantly. So in Destiny 2 alone, I think I've banked somewhere around 1,500 hours over the last 3.5 years. It's a lot. I put a lot of time in the game. Some people are way past that. So that is a big problem because you have people who play the game nonstop, and then they're like, oh, there's nothing new. It's a dead game. And I like to joke around with all my friends. Everyone who loves Destiny hates Destiny. Like there's always something to hate about it, because the flip side of this is now that we're getting all this extra story content, even just I explained the respawn mechanic. The story is really tightly tied to how the game works. So, I mean, stasis, slowing people down in multiplayer, might seem like a bad sandbox decision for how you design a competitive game, but in the story of the world where these Guardians are competing to hone their skills, and also people just watch the PV in the universe, you can hear like random NPCs chatting in the background like, oh, did you catch that Crucible match? It's crazy. Like they watch the multiplayer that you play, people watch it like sports. Like that's how tight everything is tied into the story. So even if people don't like being frozen in multiplayer, how are you going to explain the fact that this new ability is suddenly gone?
Right.
Like, as we get more and more into a story-driven game, it creates, like Chowder said, those complexities where people are going to tear through the content.
I mean, you still have to explain, right, like how all the loot from Destiny 1 is now gone in Destiny 2, right? Like
they explain that by blowing up the tower.
Oh.
The place where all your weapons was, it got blown up in the beginning of Destiny 2, and people were not happy about that. Yeah. So what we're seeing now is how I said before with Destiny 2, they didn't want to, have to rebuild the old system. They just have to start fresh.
Yeah.
They're explicitly doing the opposite now. We thought they were going to announce Destiny 3, and then when they announced Beyond Light, which we just got a couple months ago, they were like, we are sticking with Destiny 2. We are going to retool everything on the back end. We're in this for the long haul because we know you hated it the first time.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting.
Everyone who loves Destiny hates Destiny. That creates balance issues, which is exactly why they did it in the first place, because you have this gun that came out 3 years ago that is like insanely powerful, and it can totally alter the chemistry of everything you do in the game when everybody's using a single shotgun called Fellwinter's Lie, which also has its own fucking story. But, like, the story of the game is becoming more interesting because it's not all hidden. Mm-hmm. They're leaning on... and the thing is, I've always thought the lore of Destiny could have been a strength that was unharnessed, and now it's finally there.
Right.
And the convolution goes a million layers deeper than I've gotten. I've even been talking about the Awoken, which is a race of humans that, in trying to escape the collapse, got sucked into a black hole and spent 12 billion years in an alternate dimension, immortal, evolved into a new race, and then came back out the black hole, and now they just kind of hang out with us. Fine.
Cool.
That's okay.
That's just there.
But at the end of the day, it's still fun as hell to shoot stuff in this game. It's fun to cast your magic spells. It's fun to bounce around. It's fun to listen to the people talk. And it's really, really fun, most importantly, to play with your friends. So Destiny's convoluted as fuck.
Yeah.
And they're finally getting better at turning that into the strength it can be and making a more interesting game. It is a flawed game. Nobody likes it, and everyone loves it. It's fucking ridiculous. So,
that kind of makes me think of Final Fantasy 14. And
tell me about this.
This is coming from a secondhand understanding, but like Final Fantasy 14, unlike other Final Fantasy games, is a MMO, and when it first came out, people despised the game. It was the mechanics.
Final Fantasy 14, that's the MMO, the massive multiplayer online Final Fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. I just want to make sure I'm right on
that. Yeah, and like the UI was god awful. Like you'd have like your screen covered in ugly looking menus. It was slow. The story made no sense. And like when it first came out, people hated it. Like it got so bad that like all the devs like got on stage and publicly apologized.
It's not what you want.
Yeah, it was that they opted to stick with it and like make like expansions and improvements that made the game better. And over time, people were like, "Hey, this is coming together kind of nice." And the game could never really overcome that initial impression. So what they opted to do was create Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, which is basically a complete overhaul of the original game to the point where it's just a new game altogether. And it even like affected the story of the original 14 in that like there was a grand finale event where like Ragnarok was coming down and like all the players could experience it because like you could just walk out the door, look in the sky, and see a giant fucking meteor and stuff, which eventually led to like all the players being able in the original game being able to fight God and resulting in a universe reset and bringing us to Realm Reborn. Cut to today, Final Fantasy Realm 14, A Realm Reborn is beloved. Like the fans of that game are like religiously in love with that. It's a meme to like have people like go into a long rant about how amazing Final Fantasy 14 is and why you should join in, and how like the first 40 levels are free and what have you. And like from what I'm seeing of other people, it is an amazing game. So amazing, in fact, that like I'm like thinking to myself, maybe I should try that game out. And keep in mind, I don't like MMOs. I don't like MMOs.
Yeah,
but like I'm like, maybe I should try.
And that's the thing. MMOs generally are not my like I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. I've played the shit out of Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim. Elder Scrolls Online doesn't do it for me. Even though it's gorgeous, I love the environments, I love the story, but I don't find the game itself engaging. But Destiny, if you put aside the story, if you put aside everything, it is fun to play. Like physically, Bungie knows how to make a game that's fun to play. And I think even what you're saying with Final Fantasy XIV is just like you need that hook. You need something that's going to suck you in, and it's hard to get over, you know, a community screaming, "Bungie, we hate you, give us more." But like, yeah, I'm also not really an MMO guy, but I'm really glad I picked up Destiny. So it's, I mean, part of me is glad I picked up Destiny. It's been rough sometimes, my guys. I don't know. It can be really, really tricky.
Well, I mean, it's nice to have a, like, I mean, you know, this might sound like kind of a bizarre statement because I'm really not a gamer. So it's like, this is probably a more regular experience than I'm going to present it as, but it's nice to have a game that you can like come back and return to a lot. Because like a lot of times when I'm done with the game, I'm just kind of done with it until like a while later, or, you know, like even
really
games that I really like playing, like Pokemon, is just like, yeah, I still eventually lose interest, even if I'll return to it every now and again. It's just like, you know.
Yeah, and now there's like a whole host of like new controversies, especially now that Bungie and Activision aren't together.
Yeah.
Bungie is technically an indie studio. Destiny 2 is technically an indie game. It's self-published, which is just a funny label. Yeah, given how big it is.
It kind of makes me think of like how Masahiro Sakurai, Smash Bros. Developer, is technically a freelancer. Like, no.
Wow.
Like, he's technically a freelancer. He left Nintendo some time ago, but like they always like come to him and go, "Come back to us."
Yeah, to like specifically
for one
Smash,
reason or another, and he's like, "Okay." I mean, they also came to him like, "Hey, come back to us. We want you to work on a Kid Icarus game," and he's like, "Okay."
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, that fucking speaks to his viability as a freelance worker.
Yeah.
But no, since Destiny went free to play, since they embraced the MMO terminology, and since everything has to be self-funded, we've seen a lot of good new stuff because they can do a lot more wide-ranging things.
Yeah.
Take more risks, but also there are a lot more microtransactions now, only for cosmetic things. But like I mentioned in the last briefing program, like it's starting to really wear on some people's nerves. And I'm torn because on one hand, I don't want to have to pay more than I already pay for the game because you don't have to, but I choose to because I like it. But then there's also this really 90s fucking looking set of armor that just looks like a guest spot on Fresh Prince that I want to buy for my character.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, it's so dumb. The helmet looks like Oakley's in a baseball cap visor. Like it's so stupid, but like I don't know. It's a wonderful magical game that is amazing and terrible, and nobody will ever shut up about how terrible it is. But yeah,
speaking of getting someone to shut up about ways that Destiny are, let's move on to the ratings.
So, I mean, how do you want to do this? I mean, at this point, I mean, I've said my piece on the game. It's amazing. There's just a lot to it. Like, is this going to be rated on, like, whether you guys would try it or what your thoughts are? Like, what is this?
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess like from me and Jeff, it's like how interested we are in the game.
Because Jeff doesn't play first-person shooters, so I know this is a hard pass on Jeff.
If we're rating it based on how likely we are to try it, then I don't think anything you could have said would have made me go above a 0. Because I will vomit if I play this game, no matter how interesting it is. But yeah, I mean, just like, I guess since like the whole point of it was talking about like the lore and stuff like that, I guess our interest in the story of Destiny, and then Chowder, you know, if you want to talk about how likely you are to play it, that's your thing. But you know, speaking for myself, I don't know. I would say it sounds interesting. It doesn't have quite as many hooks in it as like. It didn't have a lot that grabbed me because, like, a lot of the more interesting stuff sounded like also the stuff that is, like, has gone unaddressed, really, for, like, almost the entire, like, what the darkness and what the big ass orb are and stuff like that. So I'd probably give it, like, a 5 or a 6.
Yeah, they're as far as those big story hooks, like, this seems to be like Avengers style, where it's like, hey, you played for 10 years, and you're gonna get a fucking bomb payoff at the end. That's the promise right now.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. I would say that the hooks in this primarily are the gameplay, because the gameplay is rock solid. Like I said, no matter how much you hate the story, it's a fun game to play.
For sure.
And Jeff, you're just never gonna know.
Never going.
And that's fine. that is totally fine.
Yeah. So for me, like, Destiny's always been that game I've kind of like looked up in the distance, like, and like the thing is, the only other time I really got into like a multiplayer game was Overwatch, and that I fell off of because I didn't really have anyone to play with. Like, you can only solo queue for so long before you just get fed up with that. And but like with Destiny, there are people I know who play it. You, Pat, Austin. So like between that and like the fact that I do like convoluted lore, shit, I might give it a shot. Here's what I'll
say. It is free to play. There's no limit on it. There's just content you have to pay for if you want it. Crossplay between platforms is coming out this summer, I think. So if you want Chowder, you, me, Pat, some other folks who play with, some of whom you might know, if you do want to try it out, it's a free download. You'll play that mission where you wake up in the middle of nowhere, and there are some ethical things I didn't get into here that I have questions about in terms of the story. But yeah, you could try it out with us and see if the lore is as fun to experience as I have failed to make it out to be.
Yeah, you know what? I'll take you up on that. I give it a 7.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah, something else I want to say. Like I said, the game starts off now like you get woken up by the ghost. I've been looking for you for so long. But there are explicit story things that say that when you wake up, you don't have memories of your previous life. You're just resurrected by the ghost, and then you're basically in it. And I'm just like, that seems a little morally fucked up.
So they're just like fucking,
because you're essentially just using someone's body.
Yeah.
As it's like you're not a puppet, you're a person.
So then why do you remember the next several times you die? Or the implication is you don't.
Well, I think it's because it's like it's the first time the light resurrects you. I guess generates a new mind. But basically, spoilers alert, the character that killed Nathan Fillion's character was from the original Destiny. He came back, he killed Nathan Fillion, and then he died. And now he's a guardian and has no memory of killing Nathan Fillion. So we're told to like give him a wide berth and like let him enjoy his new life because he's a different person. I'm like, what are the ethics of farming people's dead bodies to put new personalities in them? Because I don't know if they're ever gonna address that one, but I have questions.
Yeah, that is questionable.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Verily.
But yeah, wow. I really don't even feel like I said anything about this game. There's so much more to it.
Honestly, a lot of it went in one year and out the other. So.
Oh gosh. It's fun. I'm gonna play some later today. I'm gonna play a game mode that everyone cries is broken, but I'm gonna play it anyway.
Proud of you.
Oh well. Also, fucking Jeff, the guy who plays. Have you watched season 3 of Star Trek Discovery?
Yeah.
The one in the future?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you remember the Admiral, the guy that was he was in
Vance?
Fucking Admiral Vance.
Yeah.
He plays a character in Destiny and has been since before he was on Star Trek. And it's so fucked because I like Vance so much in Star Trek that this guy's talking to me and all I can hear is Vance. It's fun, but it's really dissonant because his character in Star Trek is less of an asshole than in Destiny. So anyway, that's all.
That's funny.
That's it.
I
was going nowhere with that.
Fucking, this is like only tangentially related, but it was on my mind from when you were talking about voice acting stuff earlier. But like, fucking Frank Welker, who is the actor who plays a bunch of different characters, including but not limited to Megatron and Scooby-Doo and like every animal ever, right? It's just like he plays so many voices, but then when you actually hear him like talk in his own voice, it's just unavoidably Fred from Scooby-Doo, and it messes me up so much every time I hear him talk. It's just like, oh wow, that was just the one voice that you just didn't do anything for.
That's how I felt with Seth MacFarlane when I was like, oh shit, it's Brian from Family Guy. What the fuck?
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh god.
But anyway, that on that questionably relevant note, I think that's going to be a good place for us to wrap it up today. Thank you for listening to the Common Geeking Program. Again, I've been your host, Jeff Leavitt. You can find me. I've got a YouTube channel where I do toy reviews. If that's your thing, that's called Alchemist Prime Reviews. I also have an Instagram that I once upon a time uploaded art stuff to, like, before the fucking pandemic, and that's Things I Wish Existed, and there's a dot between each word. One day I'll upload more things to that. But and again, I've been joined by Colin and Chowder. Do either of you have things you want to toss out there?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chowder.
Yeah. Okay, so you can find me on Twitter, and here is an important change about my Twitter. I changed the my handle from Taeemul Chowdhury. Well, it wasn't actually originally Taeemul Chowdhury. My name was too long, so it was like
Chowder. Yeah,
and it cut off before the Y. So I've changed that so that now it is Taeemul Chowder. Taeemul _Chowder.
Okay.
There you go.
Because
seems easier.
It's a little more on brand. It's easier to spell, so I can just tell people, and they'll probably be able to get there. I guess my first name would might be a hindrance, but whatever. It is my Twitter handle is now at Taeemul Chapter.
Nice.
I usually plug all the other podcasts, but I need some more people to do the Vault of Glass raid when it gets put back into Destiny later this month. So if anybody's playing on Xbox...
So you can find Colin on Destiny.
Yeah, it's same as my Twitter handle, SonicColinK. Come play Destiny with me. It's terrible. I love it.
All right. And our next episode of the podcast is going to be our next briefing program, which will air on the 1st of June. And then our next regular... no, not the 1st of June. The first Friday in June. Sorry, the 4th of June. And our next regular Common Geeking Program episode will be on the 3rd Friday in June. The 3rd Friday in June, where my voice doesn't crack, which is the 18th. So yeah, be sure to look forward to that. Anyway, thank you all for listening and subscribing and sharing and everything that you do, and we will talk to you next time.
And I really hope that, like me, you have a greater understanding of Undertale.
Ciao. The Common Geeking Program is hosted by Jeff Leavitt, joined this episode by Colin, Ketchen, and Taeemul Chowdhury. This episode is sponsored by Summer. Fucking finally, the semester is over. The podcast is created and produced by Colin Ketchen and Jeff Leavitt, and features original music by Colin Ketchen. This episode was edited by me, Taeemul Chowdhury. We'd love for you to stay engaged with us on social media at Geeking Program, or by using hashtag CGP. If you want to know more about us and all of our other projects, head to commongeekingprogram.com. Stay in touch, stay tuned, and as always, thank you for listening to this podcast. Ciao!